It was the first live one we'd done. It went very, very well. We got some tremendous emails from people saying how much they enjoyed it. And it was myself and Ian Crane. I just had Ian on as a guest. And one of the first things we talked about on the programme was Gary McKinnon. So as I started the show with Gary tonight, I thought we'd start off this one tonight with Gary, just really as an update. Because, Ian, it could literally be a matter of days now before the guy's on a plane and thrown to the lions in America. Is there anything else we can do?
I've got to say, Ross, it's not obvious. He's got, good lawyers at this end. The problems are that, the machinations of the transatlantic legal process are, generally way beyond the layman. And as, we have discussed before, Tony Blair, apart from selling his soul, sold the UK down the proverbial Swanee. When it came to these extradition agreements with the US, because there is no doubt. I mean, it is a completely biased system in favour of the US. I mean, if Gary was in the US and it was the UK Ministry of Defence that were trying to claim that Gary had been hacking, as a US citizen, had been hacking into their computers, the US attitude would have been, yeah, well, he might be a hacker, but he's our hacker.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the whole point, isn't it? It is one-sided. Now, since we did the TV show, I've written to the House of Lords, I've written to Gordon Brown, to the Home Secretary, Yvonne Smith, I've written to Barack Obama, to John McCain, to the White House. But the most intriguing of all is I was trying to rouse some interest with the Daily Mirror and the Sun, and I picked up on a number of reporters on both papers, emailed them. One of them came back to me from the Sun, very interested in knowing a bit more about it. As soon as I told them the background of the case, I've heard no more since.
Yeah.
Now, normally a story like this where you're rousing interest, I mean, the Sun have done front pages on the Germans stealing our deck chairs before, That's how patriotic they claim to be, and yet something like this they're not supporting. It stinks to me of a cover-up.
Well, I think that's pretty much the case. I mean, I'm sure that basically there's all but a D-notice on the issue now. It's run its course, as it were, in the British and European legal system, and Gary's on his way. But so, I mean, the great tragedy here is that, of course, it sets a very, very unfortunate precedent. And as we discussed on Saturday. I've read a number of articles where parallels are drawn with the NatWest 3, who were extradited to the US last year. But there is a massive difference here. And, the NatWest 3 hatched their plot to defraud NatWest in the UK. But then they physically went to Houston, Texas, to the headquarters of Enron to meet up with Andrew Fastow, who's the chief financial officer of Enron, and explained their plan to Fastow. And Fastow, of course, it's now proven beyond any reasonable doubt that he was effectively the architect behind the incredible fraud that was conducted by Enron throughout much of the 90s. And anyway, Fastow, seeing the opportunity to make another million on the side, leapt at the opportunity. But nonetheless, the three guys were there in the US. So the reason for extraditing them to the US was fundamentally they had committed a crime on US soil.
Yeah.
Gary, of course, has not. As far as I know, he basically committed everything from, wasn't it, his girlfriend's aunt's bedroom.
That's right. There's a house in Primrose Hill, I think, in North London.
Yeah, so, this is really outrageous. And I think the other problem, perhaps, is that Gary was perhaps just a little too quick to admit that he had, done some hacking into the U.S. system. That's why under U.S. law, the smart thing to do is to absolutely say nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the basis that you can't incriminate yourself.
But even in UK law, Ian, you're innocent until proven guilty, and you do have the right to change your plea.
Yeah, but in the US, that is not the case. US law, first of all, it differs from state to state. Well, so let me talk about, for example, Texas law, which is, what I'm very familiar with. And in Texas law, fundamentally, you're guilty of anything that anybody accuses you of, and until you've got no money left.
Yeah.
It is absolutely a business, and consequently, you're going to be screwed for every penny you've got, and then eventually it'll come down to a plea bargain. And once you've got no money left, then they'll throw you to the wolves. Here, of course, basically Gary successfully broke into computers within the U.S. Defense Network. But, I mean, the irony is, of course, that Gary himself has stated that there was no protection on these computers.
Exactly. Well, he said he downloaded a free software off the internet. Now, here's a guy that's been diagnosed with Asperger's. He's gone on, in similar probably style to the Rain Man, gone on there, determined to find out if UFOs really exist, stumbled across some places that he shouldn't have got into, and bang, all of a sudden he's a master hacker. You know, it's just crazy. But if the information that he got is genuine, he says that he found information on non-terrestrial officers, which means people not of this planet serving for the US military. Now, if he did find that, and I'm saying if, then you can understand why the US don't want that put out in a public court here where the press could cover it.
Well, that's certainly very true. By the way, non-terrestrial officers could also mean human officers based off-planet.
True.
You know, so it does cut both ways. But, yeah, I mean, there's no question that if, and we have to say if, the information that Gary uncovered, you know, is of such a nature, then there's no question that the U.S., would be doing everything in its power to ensure that this information does not make it into the wider realm. But we do have to also acknowledge that, you know, they probably didn't nail Gary at the first attempt. So there's a very strong possibility that they worked out what he was looking for. And had laid, a false trail.
Yeah.
I mean, we just don't know, obviously. But the reality is that, he has successfully hacked into the U.S. And what we know is that the U.S. does not like anybody getting one over on them.
Absolutely.
I mean, Cuba's still paying the price.
Well, that's right.
Nearly 50 years on.
The important thing about this, a lot of people don't know, is this alleged crime was committed in 2002, I believe. And we're now in 2008. Why has it taken so long, Ian, to get it to this stage?
Well, I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, there is due process to go through, and I mean, it has been milked. I mean, I think initially the US were hoping that the British government would do something about it, just as they would do, and just shut him down. But of course, that isn't the way things work here yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So once they realised that the British government weren't actually going to do anything about it, then obviously they took the initiative themselves. And, they've had to go through the process, through the courts, because, of course, Gary is resisting, understandably, the extradition order. But, ultimately, let's look at how things could pan out going forward. I mean, if he goes over there, tragically, he's either looking at a long jail sentence, but, because the U.S. fundamentally works on a plea bargaining system, in reality, Gary's probably looking at a job for life. It might not actually be the terms and conditions that he'd be hoping for.
No, absolutely.
But the CIA would certainly be looking to make use of his skills so that he does indeed become their hacker.
Well, that's of course if he is a master hacker and not, as he says, someone that's just stumbled across. Now, I've got to stop you there, Ian, because we need to go to a break. When we come back after the break, we're going to be talking about